Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Inside Whitehall with me, Jonathan Gullis.
Me, James Starking.
We are recording this on the eve of poll, the 6th of May, right before the big D Day. That is the 7th of May local elections, and of course, the devolved elections in Scotland and Wales. The build up has been quite extraordinary, with Peter Mandelson dominating the headlines, and then the last week has been relentless rumour about whether or not Sir Keir Starmer is going to be challenged immediately after the local elections, where Streeting apparently has the numbers but doesn't want to trigger the race. Angela Rayner apparently 1 minute has the numbers, then doesn't have the union's backing. And Andy Burnham, the self-proclaimed King of the North, is apparently waiting to do some sweetheart deal where he will be able to return to Westminster and allegedly has finally got the Labour's National Executive Committee on board. Of course, Nigel Farage has been touring the country, 71 stops across the country, and this is big for reform because they need to continue their momentum if they are to try and credibly suggest they are the government in waiting and the official opposition in all but name to Labour. And of course, the Conservatives looking to bounce back from what many consider may have been the low point in last year's locals and start to see a recovery slowly but surely as they've seen improving opinions on Kemi Badenoch's personal ratings. Will that, though, rub off on the Conservative Party? Zach Polanski's Greens looking for a big night in central London, and the Lib Dems, well, who knows? I think it's fair to say, based on the media coverage so far. James, let's start. You're a London lad in terms of where you're living. What do you think we should be looking out for? Do you think that shine has come off Zach Polanski a bit after what has been a tumultuous week for him with many voters?
Well, I like the way you call me a London lad. I think we both know I'm at least as much of a Stoke lad as you are. um, I thought, and
You're a proper Stokie, James. You're a proper
I'm a proper
Stokie. You're a proper
Stokey.
Stokie.
And also, I can't help but thinking if I was Keir Starmer, which is a leap in a multitude of ways, I might be. I watched the Arsenal game last night. I thought Arsenal, like Keir Starmer, a month ago, I'd say, Keir Starmer's leadership has got about as much chance as Arsenal's title challenge after they lost to Manchester
Hey,
City. Well, they've turned it. So maybe Keir was watching them last night and thinking, perhaps I can turn this around after all. I think I don't think that they've got a Gyökeres or a Saka in the cabinet, who's going to help them do this. So
or
I
even Mikel
fear,
Arteta, James. Or even
or
Mikel
even
Arteta.
Mikel Arteta. So I fear they may not be able to mount the turnaround that Arteta and Arsenal have. But that'll be the ones in red. Will be hoping that they can do that. I mean, I was thinking about this morning. It's a weird week. So we're rounding on me and you have been involved in various ways in a lot of elections now, I'm guessing, of national, local,
Too many, James.
too
Too
many
many.
to mention. And coming into the week, the disaster was all around Keir Starmer. And I think, I don't think we need to go into like individual scandals so much. But I think it's nonetheless true that like Reform have had their own problems coming to this week. Polanski, starting with his attack on the police, which the moment I saw, which for anyone that hasn't seen, but I'd be surprised if they're listening to us, they haven't seen this. That when Polanski criticised the police officers during their arrest of what was an attack in Golders Green, our man, I think you given this would now be an ongoing court case, having just come off jury duty myself, he would be an alleged attacker. He will have to go in front of a court of law. But they, held him down and pinned him down aggressively, as you would do with someone who is suspected to have just recently carried out 2 murders and is wielding a knife.
And carrying a knife. Carrying a knife.
Carrying a knife, and attacked the police for the manner in which they carried out this arrest, which seemed, to me, the moment I saw the comments, it reminded me of Jeremy Corbyn and his comments post the Salisbury poisoning, when he really, started to question whether the Russians were involved in the attack. And I think there's a real turn amongst big parts of the electorate that said, hang on, I don't trust this guy in national security with Corbyn. And I think throughout last weekend, you could see that. We spoke about this. He pulled back from those comments. He now seems to be going back to them after a Today interview, as in BBC Radio 4 Today interview today. But I think they're toxic, and he spent this week, the last 3 days, mired in that, and more attacks. The Times this morning, or on Wednesday the 6th, covered a story where he claimed to be a spokesman for the UN. I think, I can't remember.
It's Red Cross, Red Cross, James, Red Cross. It
Was it
was
forgive
just saying.
me?
That's
Which
right.
he then said, "Oh, yes, that's right. I did carry their words with me on stage," which, apart from anything else, struck me as the worst politician's answer. It struck me as like a kind of classic thing that people hate about politicians. Instead of just saying, "Yeah, like, oh, I did this,"
Beefed up the CV. I beefed up the CV a bit.
this kind of it was all this kind of ludicrous. And someone commented that when he goes on the mainstream media, he sounds very much like a normal politician. Which I replied on Twitter. I kind of think you're missing the point, because I think what he's learned from Corbyn, that there's no point getting into certain debates when you're on the BBC Today programme or Times Radio or LBC, is you kind of need to sound like a relative politician, and you save your, let's call them, extreme comments and views and riling, you save them for direct to voter Twitter videos, campaign rallies.
And your non-traditional media, right? Blogger, if, podcasters and stuff like that. And I agree with you. I think
I
that's
mean,
when
on
he
that, do
saves
you
that
think
stuff.
that's
Like,
true that that maybe they learned from this kind of Corbyn experience, perhaps? Because there's a lot of Corbyn about Polanski to me.
and look, and I'm led to believe from people in and around the Labour movement, there's a lot of the ex-Corbyn literal staffers who were with him when he was leader of Labour now working within the Green Party HQ or in and around Zach Polanski, certainly. So I think
Do you know
absolutely
what I would
there's a
love
lot
to
of
know?
mimicking.
I would love to know. I don't know how easy it is to find this. I would love to know how many people who are standing for the Green Party in these local elections tomorrow were kicked out of the Labour Party, or
I
or
agree with you.
kind of were Corbyn members who left after Starmer, whether or not they were kicked out, but they were basically the Corbyn joiners who left Labour. I'd love to know how many of them are currently.
I agree with you, and I think it is going to be for me fascinating what happens with the Greens because I look, my view is still that whilst this longer term will damage Zach, I think you and I both agree he'll probably escape the ballot box drama or damage, should I say, because ultimately postal voters would have already sent their postal votes in large swathes back already, and
It's a
there just
protest
seems to
tomorrow.
be,
It's a protest, isn't
and
it?
tomorrow is a protest, and I think that's, and I mean, I was struck by the fact David Lammy is tweeting today, Haringey, where he is, and where we know the Green Party's targeting. I think there's a mayoralty as well there that the Greens are also
Mm.
hoping to gain. When David Lammy goes, it's neck and neck. Now, I, I don't think anyone's probably seen David Lammy campaign as hard as he has done in Haringey in all the years he's been in the MP, apart from
Mm.
maybe when he first ran for Parliament. And the fact that he is putting out there, it's neck and neck, which backs up what I'm seeing in my own area. Labour today have been putting out a leaflet, like a stop road sign saying, last chance to stop reform
Mm.
doesn't really scream you're feeling confident based on the interactions you've had on the doorsteps and the data you've been gathering that things are looking to go your way. And this is the issue Labour's going to have. You're going to get the squeeze from the left in London, but also in parts of Birmingham and other metropolitan urban cities. And then on the other hand, in the Red Wall in particular, where there's going to be a real squeeze on the right from Reform UK and in some parts, I'm sure the Conservatives too. So I think it's going to be I'm fascinated, like you say, with what the Greens do. I think a lot of polls are suggesting they are going to net gain for those listening, about 500 to 700. I think some pollsters, I've looked at pollsters today who have looked at where the polls were at this point last year to this year, and they're saying the Greens on average are up 5 percentage points, which is a lot.
Mm.
I think Reform UK is dead level.
Okay.
I think the Tories are down by 1 to 2%,
Hmm.
and Labour's down 5 to 7% going into these elections. So it's not hard to see where the Labour vote's gone
Yeah.
based on those percentages.
Because I
Uh,
kind of like, I was talking about it with some colleagues earlier today, and I think the results are. I mean, unlike a general election, we're probably going to get a lot of results. You'll know better than me throughout the day. So I don't think we'll get Birmingham, for example, until kind of late afternoon, early evening. I don't think they start. Yeah.
Friday afternoon at the earliest. Yeah. So I mean, you've got counts are going to be going basically. Results are going to start drip feeding from about 1 a.m. at best on Friday morning, and will probably in most seats will then conclude by about 10 p.m. Friday evening. There's a few, I think, happening on the Saturday, but basically the whole day Friday will be a drip,
Also,
drip, drip of
as an
results.
aside, because you mentioned this to me, so this is a bit random but related to results. The outcome of this we already know. Will probably. So Stephen Flynn is an MP at the moment for the Scottish Nationalist Party. He is running to be an MSP, a member of the Scottish Parliament, and in the constitution of the SNP, the Scottish National Party, you cannot be both. So you pointed
Might be a
this.
twin hatter, they call it,
You
yeah.
pointed
Twin
this out
hatter
to
is the
me.
term they use.
Well, there was I can't remember his name, but there was another SNP MP on the radio this morning who was saying, "If I win my seat, I'll do it." So I listened to it and thought, "Oh, I knew about the Stephen Flynn one." So
I
also,
didn't know the other one.
I can't remember his name, so I'll try and look it up. He was, I'm pretty sure he was on Times Radio this morning. Anyway, it made me think. Well, that's at least two by-elections we're going to have on the outcome of this. But the thing that I was thinking about this afternoon is how much more will we learn? So the elections we had last year and the by-elections have been good to be able to test those opinion polls that we get now daily, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. And people
Yeah.
look at these movements from one day to another, and it's hard to discern. But we get to test if they're real. That's why political geeks like me and you love elections, because we finally get to go, well, is any of this real? Are the Greens really on this height? And so we've seen with by-election wins, yes, reform can take by-elections. And then we saw dramatically, wow, the Green support is real. But tomorrow, what is there to test? I think, to me, I said this a few weeks ago, is like, can the Greens hold this up? So if it's to be believed, and there's no reason not to, but the interesting is we get to see for sure is, if it's true, we will see the Greens take swathes of London, like a chunk of London, right?
Was it Lambeth, Lewisham, Hackney, and Haringey are
But
the four that
hundreds of
they apparently are
seats.
targeting?
As
Yeah, yeah.
potential whole councils, but almost certainly hundreds of seats. And crucially, seats of, I think, across London. I'm trying to think of them, at least. So so Wes Streeting, David Lammy, and there's a third cabinet minister with a seat in London that it will.
Well, don't forget you have
Oh,
got
Kiss,
we've
the
got
Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer himself
Yeah.
in Camden. In Camden.
So
Uh,
we've got three of the most senior members of government.
and Steve Reed, sorry, James, in Croydon.
It's Steve Reid.
in
I
Croydon.
think it's Steve Reid I was thinking of as well. We got kind of 3-4 senior members of government who we might get an indication that on the current trajectory wouldn't even be an MP if there was an election held tomorrow morning. I mean, that's going to be
And then
dramatic.
James, to back that up, we've then got Sunderland, Bridget Phillipson. You've got Pat McFadden, Wolverhampton. Angela Rayner's got Tameside currently going on, and obviously someone who's not in the cabinet, but Starmer says she wants to bring her back in.
Or
Um,
maybe the next Prime Minister.
or maybe the next Prime
By the
Minister, who
time
knows?
you're listening to this.
Well, and actually, for the Greens' perspective, you've also got, I forgot, Rachel Reeves in Leeds. The Greens are targeting there quite aggressively and thinking they can make some inroads. So you've got most of the most senior cabinet members. I think John Healey's own area is also up. So you've got most of the most senior cabinet members have got elections in their area where, like you say, James, we could literally we're going to have graphics saying, based on these results, the following cabinet ministers would lose their seats in a general election if it were held tomorrow.
And I suppose, look, we could tackle it first. The big question. So, and again, we're kicking this around. What we think about the local elections with some people from work earlier. You can't. The main question is, because Kemi's let's do the minor points. I think me and you have spoken. We think Ed Davey could start to come under pressure. I don't think he's necessarily going to go off these locals. I think this could be the starting gun. Kemi's safe.
Just to back you up, James, sorry, so Ed Davey, just so you know, most opinion polls on average suggesting 1 to 200 net gains, but in an election where, like you say, Labour and Conservative are kind of
Getting trashed,
suffering
yeah.
the getting trashed, not exactly a great situation for what should be the natural protest vote. So I agree with you. There will be questions for Ed Davey to ask. If he doesn't get over 200, I think there are going to be very serious questions for him to
Because
answer.
I suspect
If it's below 100, I think he's in a world of
it-
trouble.
But I suspect with Davey, there'll be so much going on with Labour and the Greens and a bit of reform probably as well, that like it just won't be kind of top of mind, and he'll kind of skate. And I suspect it'll be in 2 or 3 weeks. We'll start when people have dealt with the main stuff. We'll start to see opinion pieces and maybe some rumours from the Lib Dem circles that people are starting to say, well, why didn't you do better in this, and what's the plan, and da da da. So it's probably the starting gun. I think consensus is Kemi's safe. People know where we are. It's likely to back up the polls, which we know haven't moved for the Tories, but she's been making an impact. I've spoken to a few Conservative MPs in the past few days and people around the elections. I've got a lot of sympathy with it because I said to them, look, this is a protest election tomorrow. And wherever we are as a party, and I think we're making improvements in terms of where we are with the electorate, in the sense that we have now a leader who's quite popular relative to the other leaders. We're kind of broadly trusted on the economy, etc. We're making some cut-throughs on stories, but we're not converting that currently to voting intention, but it's one step at a time. But I think what we're not the protest party, and to an extent you don't want to be. We want to go from where we were in 24, working our way towards a party of government, not a protest party, in my view. But I think that means that's accepted by Tories. And look, Farage isn't going to. Reform's almost certainly going to have a good night, and whatever happens, Farage isn't going to go anywhere. The question is, the Prime Minister will this start the firing gun on the road to the Prime Minister? The more, and I'm curious for your view. I go round and round. The Labour people tell me Wes can't go for it because it'll end him, and he's kind of maybe in that position where he's not quite liked by the whole of the party, and wielding the knife would kind of finish him off. Rayner seems unsure. Some of the briefing from Rayner friends to me seem more about getting her into cabinet than preparing a leadership bid. To me, I personally think the Team Rayner goal for post locals is currently to get a senior cabinet position and rebuild from there. And
I think with Rayner, James,
there's no burden.
Well, I was about to say, I think with Rayner, we hear a lot that people say she doesn't actually want the top job. And I've got to be honest with you, sometimes you get the sense from the briefings that come out around her, you wonder, actually, does she really want it? For me, my interpretation of those briefings, and again, I'm not personal friends with this, so this is just interpretation, is that she's willing to go if Burnham's not there, basically, and it means that Wes is going to be, it's either a coronation of Wes Streeting or it's going to be a contest. And I think she's prepared to stick her neck out to basically not allow Wes a coronation. I think, however, and we obviously saw that photograph of Andy Burnham, I think, going round to her personal property late one evening. I suspect there's been a lot of conversations about if Andy were to return, she will row in behind him and it'll be like a joint ticket situation of leader and deputy leader. I'm not saying she'll be chancellor, I'm just saying leader and deputy leader. I'm not even sure Rayner would want that position. There's also a lot of rumours that Ed Miliband would be Andy Burnham's choice for chancellor. Now, just in case any of the Labour lot are listening, both Conservative James and Reform Jonathan here would very much welcome politically, long term, you to promote Ed Miliband. The damage will be catastrophic in the short term, but believe me, when the general election comes, we look forward to seeing Ed Miliband's face on a lot of our leaflets and reminding the voters who's in charge of the economy.
I think in every single way possible for the Labour Party, I personally think that would be a disaster.
I thought it was interesting, James, because
I know people in Labour who think the same thing.
No, I agree with you. And I think the sensible heads in Labour I talk to as well, I'm totally concerned about it. And I think what's fascinating to me, and I thought Sam Coates' podcast, Politics with Sam and Anne, I thought was really good because I actually, when I was tuning in, listening to it, he was talking about Burnham and coming back in. I think Sam hit the nail on the head where he wasn't saying it explicitly, but I think he was saying there's a lot of rewriting of history around Andy Burnham.
Yes.
In terms of what he was like as a minister under Tony Blair, about his politics. He was a major Blairite. Now he's a kind of softer Miliband,
now he's the hero
essentially.
of the soft left, apparently, yeah.
Now he's the hero of the soft
Also,
left. This is a man who... And this is a man, James, I was about to say, this is also a man who...
He's not done a great job in great...
The police are in special... The police, you're bang on, the police are in special measures. I think if you read, there's a lot of people say that he's not really got a team around him. So if you're quite worrying about someone who wants to be Prime Minister, they seems to have literally one or two people actually work for him politically. So who are all these people he's suddenly going to hire to fill 10 Downing Street? And I think people forget he's had 2 goes at the leadership and wasn't even close.
You say this, when I talk about it to Labour friends, I forget that. People in Labour haven't forgotten that. So there's definitely groups of people in Labour who immediately remember that and therefore think the whole thing is ridiculous. And so I think, look, I'll be honest, I think the media know all this, but it's too good a story. This King of the North, is he going to challenge Starmer? They love the
And let's be honest,
drama.
James, by the way, the media have also done a good job of doing, they've done a lot of puffing up of Andy Burnham over the years. I think it's fair to say. I've
Because
seen a
it
lot of,
works for them, right? It's a great narrative to have this, guy pop down them from the north that gives them a big headline, slaps the PM around on this or that, whether it was a Conservative Prime Minister or now a Labour one, and this kind of young pretender in the north, it plays to kind of Shakespearean, plays or whatever,
yes.
which is kind of in the British imagination. I don't think that hurts, and so the media narrative, they love it, but they've got all these stories on stock, right? There'll be some of the journalists that were around towards the tail end of that Blair Brown administration. They'll know stuff. There's the fact that his record in Greater Manchester, actually beyond a couple of issues, I think transport, you can claim that he's been very good at branding and it's other people. I don't know how much that's true. I think if you put him in charge of transport and transport goes well, it doesn't really matter how it happens. You kind of got to give someone credit, personally. Because I think the same goes on policing or
Yeah.
on other issues. And I think his record to be dragged up and found not to be particularly amazing. And to your point, it will be who is Andy Burnham, because he was a Blairite. He's now the kind of new Miliband of the soft left. And so what do we get?
And bearing in mind, we've also had the comments of we don't need to be at hoc to the bond markets. There's now even a comment about we would borrow for defence. I think it was defence, but we would borrow outside of the fiscal rules, as somehow that wouldn't therefore count towards government debt, which we all know
The
just
gilt
makes
markets
no
are
economic
reacting to
sense.
this. They're selling at the moment because people are nervous about what will there be a leadership change? They know if there is, it probably goes left. What does that mean for government debt, spending, tax?
Well, by the way, James, didn't help when Keir Starmer basically refused to give his chancellor confidence at PMQs, the last PMQs for with Pro Parliament,
That
and
was
then had to do a
strange,
conference,
wasn't
and
it?
then had to do a press quote, and then had to get a spokesperson to give a quote after PMQs to say he had full confidence. I mean, that's not a great sign, is it? The bond markets must be sat there going, "What the hell is
But
going on?"
what?
Bearing in mind, in the run up to that, we'd had relentless stories that she was going to be some sort of sacrificial lamb in Starmer's God knows how what reset we're on now. I've literally lost track of the
Mm.
reset, but whatever reset number we're on now, seems like he literally has Rachel Reeves, which is literally probably the only person he's got left to sack if he has to sack someone.
But yeah, and the funny thing is, because I pointed this out to someone today, if you look at the markets, so look, let's not get into what we think of Trump and Iran. we're, we're not we're not here for that. But what we do know is that the kind of vibe, if you want, around the kind of US Iran deal is, we heard in the last 24 hours that Trump basically came out and said, look, we're not bombing Iran anymore. That's over. It's now focused on getting the Strait of Hormuz open. People will have their views on this stuff. But, the FTSE's back up. That's been lit up red for almost 2 weeks daily. Nasdaq's been doing okay. S&P 500, up 1%. The markets are looking a bit more relaxed today, basically. You can see that. In this country, apart from the gilts, who are nervous because of the leadership stuff. And it's being weaponized now already by Number 10, who are using that to go out and say to Labour MPs, don't risk, dare I say it, a trust moment, is what they will say. So it's being weaponized. But we've both seen this before. I also, by the way, as an aside, and something I'm sure we'll discuss again, and we've said before, the problem with changing a leader is the public didn't elect the new leader and all the things that they then claim a mandate on. But before you get to that, in a way, I mean, me and you have these discussions with people all the time because of our jobs, because of the jobs we've done in the past. I always say, yeah, this is all true, but it doesn't matter because, as was with there's different rules. But the same thing with the Tories and Labour apply. It's up to this bunch of people called MPs. And in my experience, And MPs, understandably, they want to be elected, otherwise they can't do all the things they came into politics to do. So when they look at things and think, if I stick with this person, I'm probably no longer going to be elected. Number one, that's their job. Most
Yeah.
MPs don't have loads of that this is the job they do. Number two, they got into politics to do something. So if they're not an MP anymore, they can't do it. So that will force them to act in sometimes rational and sometimes irrational ways. And I think, the issue is if they look at these set of elections, and this we've said this includes people in the cabinet, and think, well, if we stick with this guy, we're on the Titanic. We are heading towards the iceberg. We are going down. At that point, what do you do? Do you think, well, I hope it just grazes the side and we manage to make it all the way to New York, or do you change your captain?
I mean, this is what I just. It comes back to the same thing. The polling shows Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner are less popular than Keir Starmer when it comes to the polling that we've had done on hyper, and I appreciate the hypotheticals with the public. The only one that Starmer loses to is Andy Burnham. But again, it's easy because Andy Burnham's not in Westminster right now and he's been able to sort of speak more freely. The Andy Burnham thing always makes me laugh because it comes back to what you said, James. Which MP stepping down? So number one, we now know there must be a deal. So what was the price of that deal for that MP to step
Mm.
down and give up their job? Because they're just giving it up. Now, some are suggesting, for example, that like it could be a Manchester MP who gives up and then they're anointed the mayoral candidate. But the polls might suggest, as they did towards Gordon Denton, that person might not even win. Now, they may hold on because the voting system's changed back from first past the post to single transferable vote, I think it is. So you're relying on Green voters being willing to lend their vote if they were to come behind Labour and give it all to Labour. There's no guarantee of that anymore. In fact, who's to say Labour voters don't come behind the Greens, etc. Like you just can't predict that. So number one, who's willing to take that gamble of their career? If it's not there, is it the House of Lords? Is this person going to get a peerage? Peter Dowd in Bootle was named quite a lot.
Mm.
He's been an MP for over 20 years. Some people would suggest, well, is that going to end up in a year's time? We're going to suddenly see Lord Dowd being anointed, and obviously then we'll know there. So you got that. Then he's got the NEC, and we're led to believe by a briefing to the Telegraph, which I think you and I are very sceptical that a Labour person would choose the Telegraph to brief this to.
It's an interesting
But
place.
allegedly, it's an interesting place to drop it.
Mm.
I think what's we're intrigued there is they're suggesting Andy Burnham's now got the NEC kind of on side, and maybe Starmer's too weak to block him. But there's that battle. And then, of course, if Starmer does approve him, then the questions will be, well, why didn't you approve him with Gorton Denton
Mm.
literally months
But
ago?
then,
Now it looks
then he's got
now
to
that
win.
then we've got the actual election, and Andy Burnham might we might all think, oh, Andy Burnham would win in a safe Labour seat. Like, are we really that confident? Reform were going to go hammer and
What
tong at that seat
what
because
happened?
they would want to take on Burnham. And
Remind
the
people of Gorton,
Greens,
right? Like
yeah,
that. I mean, I think we spoke about it right afterwards. If Burnham ran in Gorton, they probably would have won.
but you can't guarantee it.
You wouldn't put your mortgage on it, right? You wouldn't go double or quits on your mortgage on it. And I think, and so
And by the way,
seats,
James,
what seats
in
are
that
safer than
election,
that?
well, what seats to save that? And also in that election, guess what Andy Burnham's going to be asked the whole time? Do you fully support Keir Starmer?
Mm.
And he's going to obviously have to say the Prime Minister's got my backing. So now the Tories, Reform, Greens, Lib Dems all get to go. This guy's Keir Starmer's choice, Keir Starmer's personal puppet. And that's going to damage Bram Burnham because, of course, if he doesn't answer that question straight, then the whole election is so. This election is about you coming to take out Keir Starmer.
Mm.
So, does Labour really want that 6 weeks of those headlines, which is going to be, as you know, James, daily? That's all we're going to talk about. Who's backing Andy Burnham? Who's on the campaign team? Who's been out most with him? Blah, blah, blah. Which cabinet ministers have been out
But
with
let,
him the
let me flip
most,
this
etc.
round. So let's imagine a scenario, which it's going to be difficult for you. Let's imagine a scenario that you, Jonathan Gullis, former Conservative MP, having lived through, you were elected in 19 as an MP,
Yeah,
you saw COVID, but you saw this guy, Boris, who helped you get elected, get that job
yeah,
that you'd always
got me the
wanted.
job. Yeah,
And you saw him and you saw how he dealt with COVID, but Partygate, etc. You saw his demise, the change of leadership to Liz Truss, the change of leadership to Sunak, and the kind of how long did we have with Rishi? 2 years or so
2 years. Yeah,
in the run up to an election, which then cost you your seat, your job. Not to, I don't want to. This is not a therapy session. I want to upset you. So tell me if you want me to stop. I don't want to bring back
I
bad news.
bear responsibility just like everyone
I
else,
know you
James.
do.
I own my own
So,
responsibility
but
in
let's
this at all.
say you're no longer a member of Reform. For some reason, and we can't work out why, you wake up and you're now an advisor to Labour MPs. And you're in a room. And as the Parliamentary Labour Party is before you. And they say to you, Jonathan,
Really sure it's
we're 19% in the polls. We've got over 2 years, 3 years till the next general election. The economy's stagnated. There's problems in the jobs market. People are struggling with the cost of living. Keir Starmer's made these terrible decisions on Peter Mandelson. He tried to get his comms director to be the ambassador to Barbados or whatever it was. What should we do? We've got this Angela Rayner. She's a tough common talker. She understands the common man. We've got this guy Wes Streeting, quite polished, bit of a Blairite, knows how to use social media. Media quite
delivering on NHS. They say
media
right,
like
get
him.
waiting listed
He's
down.
made some progress on the NHS. And we've got this guy up in the north, wandering around, wondering what to do, trying to get himself a
Jon Snow.
and like
Jon
like
Snow
like
for
the
the
rest
North.
of us is unable to get on a train down here. It's delayed. It's not set off yet. What do we do? Do we stick with this guy here who got us elected in the next election, which every bit of data in front of us tells us means I lose my seats? Do we change? And if we change, who do we go to? Jonathan, the floor is yours. Labour MPs are listening. What do they do?
God, I'm gonna have a dream about this tonight probably after we've done this now. My advice would be Keir Starmer is personally extremely damaged, but he is also extremely damaged the Labour brand. And regardless of who comes in, if you wanted to change leader, the brand is beyond any serious repair. And actually, in my opinion, you're better off spending time using your power as a backbench parliamentary Labour Party to hone in on some policies that you think are going to actually make a difference. They're going to re-energize the left, maybe, except that you need to, the coalition that you hope to keep in the north is gone, and basically hunker down and try and become the second largest or first largest party. But really don't go after those left wing voters who have felt betrayed, but obviously have to try and do it in a balanced way and accept that Rachel Reeves has to be there, but accept that you've got a lot of power and the Prime Minister's going to have to basically negotiate and you'll be able to use that bargaining chip regularly, but do it in a way that's actually going to help you win elections. That means accept what Shabana is doing on immigration. In fact, accept she has to go further. It means, though, on the end, net zero may be that you've got Rachel Reeves is going to have to find some money to double down on some elements of that, so you can pivot onto the progressive voters a bit harder on that. Maybe it's allowing more Keir Starmer agreeing to not always front everything up all the time. Using the wider pool talent of the parliamentary party, but ultimately the Labour brand is as toxic as it is for Keir Starmer's own personal brand. And changing leader won't change what's happened to the party because, in the voters' mind, Labour are in charge, Labour are responsible, and Labour have done damage. And no matter how much distance you try and put between you and Sir Keir Starmer, they haven't forgotten. The fact in London, there are Labour leaflets going out with Labour council candidates or MPs with photos of them with Andy Burnham and not a single one with them with Keir Starmer is insane because Andy Burnham's not on the ballot paper. The voters of this ward are
You
not
don't
going to
think that'll
suddenly be
work?
swayed. They don't get no, it doesn't work. I in 2024, I couldn't have run a leaflet in that general election that talked about me as if I was basically, you might as well have said I was your local councillor.
Mm.
It was pure local stories of everything I had done locally and secured money from the government. The word conservative, I think, was pulled up by someone who was named twice on the leaflet. Like it was literally the most localized, personalized leaflet you can do. It was all my greatest achievements and greatest hits. People can say they're spinning there, whatever, but like it's everything I felt I'd done for the community. I still got my backside handed to me
Mm.
because I was still part of the Conservative Party. That name is going to appear, the party's name is going to appear next to your name and the party logo. You can't escape it, no matter how much you want to rebrand yourself. Which is why I always get mad when the Conservatives used to have local Conservatives. Rather, it doesn't change the party's logo, it doesn't change who you're
So
part of.
if you could go
So
back to let's say it was totally up to you,
I
right?
would stick with Boris. I would
Yes,
stick
you
with
would stick
Boris.
with Boris.
I would have stuck with
And
Boris.
do you think,
And
hand on heart, do you think the election result in 24 would have been better in any way if Boris had been leader rather than you'd have had? Do you think it?
I think the Tories could have maybe got to 150, 180.
So you think we would have had a better result?
A slightly better result. I think I'd have still lost my seat, but
Mm.
I think I would have had. It would have been overall. I think I think the Conservative Party would have been in a better place. I think there is then there's the debate, right? Does reform even come back on the field of play? Then I don't know. I mean, it's all hypothetical, but
Mm.
if looking back now, my view would be you'd stick with Boris
So,
and
so
try and.
being serious, you think because I think I'm with you. So if I put myself in a Labour position, which is not my natural habitat, and so
Well, I don't know, James. There's a quote in the FT where you really praise Labour's business engagement ahead of the last election.
I was asked specifically about their business engagement. You know this, we've been over this, but we can maybe end this with you talking about your shopping habits at Lush before you next attack the working party. Since you want to bring these
That was a
things up,
mistake. No, that was a mistake by
and
me.
I've got a picture that I'm more than happy to share with
I retract. I retract my attack. I
anyone
retract my
wants to do
attack.
this. But I think from everything I saw from the Tories, the problem is, I think in life we always look at things. Sometimes things in life, whether it's for us personally or politically, things can be bad and worse, not bad and good. It's not always a case of like, oh, there's a bad thing happening to me. I can do this, or I can do this other thing, which is good. Sometimes it's like, this is bad, but I could do this, which is slightly less bad or slightly more bad. And I think that's kind of where we were as the Tories. And I think, things weren't great, but what I think we kidded ourselves that things could become great or good again when we probably were in a position where we could make them marginally less bad or more bad, or worse. And I think that's where Labour are. I think things are bad. They are nowhere going to get. There is no world in which the Labour Party is going to get a significant majority at the next election. It is. Nothing's impossible in life, but it's single-digit percentages, if not points. What is possible is for them to do catastrophically bad at the next election, and I think definitely at the moment they could lose more seats than the Conservatives did in 24.
Oh, easily, easily.
And I think they're at a position where they're at a crossroads, whether they know it or not, where they can make this worse. And I personally think the electorate look at parties that change leaders a lot and say, we don't like this guy that's the prime minister. But
we voted, but he was elected by
but
the
not only
people.
that, but we voted for you lot, to your point about the brand,
Yeah.
to sort this stuff out. I don't care how you do it, right? I don't want excuses. I don't want this, and this, and this. And I think Labour thought it. I listened to Labour on the TV today, and it was Iran, 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 Iran. I mean, with the greatest respect, the Conservatives, whatever you want to say about them, they had one of the biggest catastrophes that had befallen the earth in a generation.
Since the 1920s.
Yeah.
Since the 1920s,
You know,
and health-wise.
Health-wise, health-wise in 100 years. And some people dealt with it well, but there's very, very few democratically elected governments that stayed on after that. It didn't really happen. And so, and the electorate decided, and it is up to them to say, and there were other things as well, obviously, but the electorate said, we're not happy with you getting someone else. So I think there's a delusion about this. But I also think it's the case, I think they're deluding themselves that if we can only get in Burnham, Streeting, blah, 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 then we can be back to where we were. It's like, to your point, that's gone. That's not your choice. That's not on the table. That it's not in the shop window. You can't buy that.
2024 is in the past for a reason. It's time to say goodbye to 2024.
Yeah.
It's not there.
I think you have to realise what's the possibilities. And to me, I think their best chance, and I've thought it for a while, is they stick with Starmer until about a year from the end, and then they could, if they tried the kind of Carney trick in Canada when you had a small amount of time, and Burnham's the best person because
By the way, I agree with you on this, James.
But the problem with all the others is they'll have been responsible for all the same decisions. People will say to Wes, well, you were mates with Mandelson, you went to all these dinners, and we'll hear more about them if they elected him. With Rayner, she's obviously got the tax stuff.
Affairs, yeah.
And Miliband, with the greatest of respect, we've seen that show before, and we already know how it ends, so we don't need to go into that. He was leader and lost an election, and so Burnham's their best chance. But I agree with you. Like, I don't. It's probably quite a close call. It might be the case, and we never get to know this because you can't run control experiments, that whether or not they chose Wes Streeting or Keir Starmer, if Burnham never comes back down, it might be the case there's only 20 seats difference in what the final outcome is. It probably relies more on what they actually do than what leader they have when they go in. And the one last thing I'll say is, the more you mess around, every time a new leader comes in, they spend months bringing in new staff, and a new cabinet comes in, and we've both worked in departments of government, and when you come in, it takes you a while to get up to speed, and you speak to someone who used to be there, and they say, oh, they're trying to get you to do that too. Yeah, we looked at that, and we canned it off, and you're like, okay, that's wasted 2 months on that policy. And so you waste, at minimum, 6 months, which you don't,
Yeah,
which, by the way, they do not have. They're 2 years down already. And yeah, so I was kind of curious what you thought, though. It's interesting to me that, you think if the Tories had stuck with Boris, it probably would have been less bad.
Just because I think you could have just done things. I think you just then say, like, look, we need to be really radical on policy. I think I would have just said to colleagues maybe in the Red Wall, like, look, let's go, and levelling up still kind of not really defined. Let's put some demands on the table of what we think levelling up needs to be and what it should focus on, and say that we want it funded and we want to get support for it, and we want the deregulation maybe, or the rules change, whatever it needs to happen. We'll work it. We'll go and promote it. We'll work it hard, but you need to do it, and it needs to be done within this time frame. And so we can get some projects delivered over the line, so we can demonstrate to voters things are changing. I would have also said the same on immigration, for example. Obviously, shock horror, and I think that there would have needed to be a frank conversation, and it requires the leader to be brave enough to then look at this field of the. Look, this is when you need to be a good general, right? This is what makes the Duke of Wellington and Napoleon exceptional. They would watch the battle as it was playing out and adapt their tactics and their strategy. That's why they were successful. And I think the problem is, what you need is Keir Starmer to be brave enough to say to his MPs, "I'm really sorry, guys, but we're coming back with at best maybe 200 MPs on our best day."
Yeah.
And so the truth of the matter is, we've looked at the data, we've looked at the seats. These are the areas that we can win. For some of you, I know it sucks. I'm basically telling you, I'm very sorry, but we can't achieve it. What I need from you guys is, we will do everything we can to support you in terms of getting you set up for jobs in the future. But in the meantime, what I need you to do is really rally into reform. You guys need to go and be like a shield. You can go after reform as aggressive as you want. And in return, we'll get some more of what are they calling it? It's not levelling up, they're calling it. They're pride in place.
Yeah.
We'll give some more pride in place funding in exchange for that. So you'll be able to walk away and say, that building over there has been refurbished because of me, or this market hall's now reopened because of me. But fundamentally, it's not going to change the election. And that is ballsy and brave, and requires MPs to emotionally and responsibly understand that reality and accept it as well. And the problem is, both those things, from my experience, are unlikely. And so therefore, I see the psychodrama building itself up. I think the cork's already out the bottle. And I think it's just a case of, does this election kick off early, which means it's Rayner versus Streeting, or does it end up happening in 6 to 12 months' time, where I think then Burnham probably is back somehow in Westminster? I agree with you. I think Labour's only Hail Mary is if you get Burnham in 12 months out from election, and he literally does a Carney where within 3 months max, he then goes, right, I've reversed some of these unpopular things. I'm going straight to the country before anyone gets a chance to do the hit pieces, before anyone gets a chance to see the internal fighting within the Labour Party. Yeah. And also, for him to avoid having to give any major substance at that stage of what he would do with his premiership.
And also that he's going to be left with the same economics. And so the moment he hits his first big budget and has 6 months after that, he's going to have to cut. and he's gonna, and if he wants to do something big and bold, and let's be honest, whatever he wants to do is not going to be something either you or I are probably going to agree with. But he's going to have to go to the electorate and get a clear mandate for it. But I mean, the last thing I'll say is, what I we say this, I think we're not in a wild disagreement. Again, when I was talking on this call earlier, what is going to happen? I've said this from the beginning, from the end of last year, from around the budget time. Labour have de facto dropped growth. It's now lip service. There was, in fact, a story today. I think LBC did quite an interesting story where they went back to like 127 maybe business groups, and there was only 20 of them that still would prepared to go and say, yeah, I still support the Labour government. And these were 120 or so, who had said they would support Labour coming in at the last election.
Signed a letter, right, James? A big letter was circulated around with all their signatures on it.
It's kind of, I think, relatively decent journalism, and I think a public interest to go and say, well, what do these guys think now? And so now the focus is cost of living. Well, I keep saying this internally, and I think this is, if I was a business, what I would be really alive to is there's some basic facts that we all know. So what cost of living is, how much it costs all of us to live. And what do we know? What's the main things that go out from our bank account? So any normal person, that is a mortgage, an electricity energy bill, water bill, food shopping, petrol, particularly if you live out of London. People in London forget that most people drive to work. Yeah. I think that people do forget that quite a lot. That petrol bills are not a small bill per month for the average person. School run, off to work, etc. All of these costs then through to things like holidays. Now, the government, number one, the government doesn't have any money. We're at the highest tax take for generations. It's very hard to tax more. We're spending £100 billion a year on debt. If debt was a department in government, it would be either the third or fourth largest.
I think it's third, third largest.
And so we've got all the debt we can have. The markets are very worried about us taking more, and we've taxed everyone. That's how the government can give you. But the government, what they can do is either give you money, here's winter fuel allowance, mate. There's an extra few hundred quid for your fuel. Or they can cut taxes and say, here is some of the money that you've already earned. You can have that back, actually. Other than that, there's not much they can do. Well, the other thing they can do is attack businesses. And so we've seen already, I think, some words from the government. The CMA have said they'll look into fuel. It's a pretty low margin business. There was a great moment on Laura Kuenssberg when she showed the dial-up to Ed Miliband, I think it was, and said, well, this big bit here, that's you. That's fuel duty and VAT.
It was about a third. About a third of the total.
A third of the cost, mate, is you. So if you want to look at who can cut the cost, it's you. Well, we all know they can't because they don't have the money to. So I think what we're really going to get is, especially if we don't get a new leader, is between now and the budget, we are going to get, because anything those backbenchers want, you're right, they're going to call for it. Anything that costs money, where's it going to come from?
Rachel Reeves is going to have to find it. And the one place we know that you could go and find some money is if you are prepared to make some very big cuts to welfare, you could free up some tens of billions. But we and I both know Labour can't do that. So it's not even going to come from that. I mean, it's a world of pain. I am genuinely fascinated to see where they will end up. I think one thing I will just quickly say, James, is actually, because I'm quite intrigued. I've seen some polls, and obviously I'm in Reform, right? So I'm obviously biased. And people might say my numbers are spin, downplaying expectations. I think any party that gains 1,000 councillors is a good night. I think Reform, if Reform hit 1,500 gains, I think that's an incredibly strong night. I saw one person, I think Andrew maybe something or something, I can't remember, on Twitter said 1,400 net gains would be a disaster, was the word that was used for Reform. I found that mind-blowing that 1,400 would be seen as a disaster.
You mean it wouldn't be good enough?
Yeah, no, they said that would be a bad night for Reform if they gained 1,400 seats. It would be a bad night. It was being circulated by some in the Westminster lobby, and they said an okay night was 1,700 and a good night was 2,000. I think someone's hanging around with the Green Party when it's legalisation of drugs. If they think 1,400 so they've gone to Zach's cafes because they think 1,400 is a bad night. But I'm just intrigued. We're hearing a lot about momentum, James. Do you think Reform have to be hitting around about 1,500 Is that like if they're trying to generate if they for you if someone who is on the centre right of British politics, if they're trying to demonstrate they're the only credible party to beat the left at the next general
Mm.
election, do you think it has to be is 1,000 good enough? Or is 1,500 good enough? Or does it not really matter as long as they come second in Scotland, second in Wales, 1,000 councillors? At the end of the day, that's
So
the story.
I think if I give you two answers, and I'm not going to give you a politician's answer, the one that I'm kind of more convinced of is the latter. I think I probably would have said, look, it's so they've got to match their national polling. I think that's the thing you're looking at. I think, in fact, I would say Reform should be matching or beating their national polling. The question I would ask to someone from Reform is, and the answer might be yes. I think it's reasonable. But are circumstances going to be better than now for you to get votes? So, because I think your instinctive answer would say, well,
Yeah, that's fair.
Labour could do worse than now, but people aren't choosing a government tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've got the people that are unhappy with Labour, the people that want reform, but you've got a load of people who are going to go, we're just going to vote reform to tell the government to F off, right? Now,
Hence the Get Starmer out,
in a
right?
general
Hence
election,
the Get Starmer out
yeah,
line from
in a
Reform.
general election, you've fought general elections. People don't do that. There's a bit of
No.
protest, but people vote for the prime minister. They might tactically vote for someone, but what their eye is looking at is who do I want to be prime minister
Yeah.
is the key thing, and who do I not want to. But it's not I'm going to show people I don't like so and so. It's like I want that person to be prime minister, and I don't want that person to be prime minister. So tomorrow is different, and tomorrow are the circumstances in which Reform and Green can do best, which is things aren't going well for the government, the economy is not great, Mandelson chaos in Labour, and it's a free hit. So, to me, bare minimum is doing the national stuff. The thing I'll say is that I'll add to it is having, which we discussed before, read the book on how things shaped out in Canada. I think the difficulty for Farage is, and Reform is, you guys, and it's not that you won't do well at the next general election. I think you perfectly will. You can do okay, but you guys will say, "Oh, we're the Tory Party are dead." This is what we hear from Reform. Tory Party are gone. You keep saying that. I think the first couple of elections, when the Tories do much worse than they did before, people are like, "Oh wow," and so I think Scotland and Wales could play into that a bit when you're like, "Oh, Reform are the second party in Scotland." Wow. But I think if you look in London, you go, the Tories haven't lost any seats in London. People will say, that's not great, but they're not gone. In fact, we've heard they're gone for several elections and they're still there. They've still got 1,000 councillors or whatever it is. And they still are running councils, and they've been up for election and they still run them. And so I think if your stated aim is to get rid of if your stated aim is to be the best out of two, that's one thing. If your stated aim is to get rid of something else, which numbers-wise Reform kind of need to do if they're going to form a government, and you don't do that, you set that mark, then I think that brings its own issues over time.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a way to end it. And I will say, James and I'm hoping that I'm going to sort of stick on him now. Is hoping on Sunday we can try and get a recording in after the results to review what has happened, and maybe James will be throwing because I am, ladies and gentlemen, on the ballot, and I may well be sitting here as a two-time loser in two successive
You
losses,
seem very
or
confident.
oh well, I won't say confident. I don't know about, but yeah, or I might be sitting here as someone who's gained. And my count, for those who are interested, is happening overnight. So I'm one of the few areas where all the council is out. So all 44 seats are up for election. We've got 44 Labour, 44 Conservative, 44 Reform, 21 Greens, which is remarkable. I think about maybe 5 to 6 Liberal Democrats and some Independents. So it's going to be and one trade unionist and socialist coalition. Becky, who always runs in Kids Grove, she's up against me. God bless Becky. Well done for keeping up Tusk in our local area. But I think that we'll definitely look on Sunday and see. I mean, there's a lot of talk. Look. I think it's all accepted now. Plaid look like they'll be the largest party. How large we don't know, but Reform are certainly going to be close with Plaid in terms of second place, and Labour will be in a distant third. Scotland, the fascination is it looked like after Anas Sarwar saying Starmer's got to go, that Labour was slowly sort of firming up that they would just nick second place. Then the Mandelson saga kicked
Mm.
off, and I think you and I, James, from probably the same source of information up in Scotland, is thinking that it's more likely now that Reform will just pip that official opposition, which the SNP are certainly hoping will happen because they want that to be their bogeyman, let's be honest. And then obviously England will obviously have the local council election. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating night, and what the fallout is and what the ramification is and what the lessons are learned. Because like you say, we've been polled to death to the point where, James, I know you're, because you've had a polling background, have told everyone stop reading the weekly polls. They're not healthy for anyone. We're finally going to be able to say, well, we've had an actual poll of the electorate, and let's see what the electorate's actually telling us. And let's figure out if these pollsters have been doing a really good job
Yeah.
or if their numbers in multi party politics are totally off where reality is. And we'll have to deal with those consequences. So tune in, ladies and gentlemen, for hopefully another one in a couple of days' time where we will analyse the results and what it means and indeed start to see if anyone's making any moves against any potential leaders at that moment in time. I agree with James. I think it's very unlikely. Zach Polanski, Kane Badenoch, and Nigel Farage, regardless of results, because obviously two of them are expecting to be very good. One is expecting still to take a bloody nose. But the truth of the matter is that they look like they're pretty locked in. I think Lib Dems and Labour, watch out what happens there. Is going to be fascinating. And we'll see you soon.
See you soon.